Hi, and welcome to the show, A Lens into the Process of Child Advocacy and the Special Investigating Unit at Windsor County. My name is Linda Carbonell, and I am the host for your show, and I'm also the host for our Walking Through Life TV show. So today we're going to be talking with, I didn't get my glasses on. We're going to be talking to Nancy Theriault, and you are from?
I'm the program coordinator for the Windsor County Special Investigation Unit and the Child Advocacy Centers of Windsor County.
And we're going to talk a little bit about what you do with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to introduce Abby Tassel. I did it right.
Excellent.
And you are from WISE, and we're also going to get into a little bit of detail of what your program consists of and what you do.
Great.
So I think that's probably where we want to start. It's just kind of like a little bit of information. You had said you were sister partners. What's that consist of and what's involved?
Well, do you want me to start? So WISE is the Upper Valley's domestic sexual violence and stalking organization. So we are the advocacy organization in this part of Windsor County. And we are part of the multidisciplinary team that is the Special Investigative Unit.
Right.
So we are the advocacy organization that sits on that multidisciplinary team. WISE itself is an organization that's part of the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. So there are three organizations in Windsor County that are member programs of the Vermont Network. Mm-hmm. It's WISE, SafeLine, and the Women's Freedom Center. And the three network programs all do very similar work, just in different catchment areas in Windsor County. So we all have 24-hour crisis lines, 24-hour advocacy. We accompany victims of sexual violence, domestic violence, and stalking to court, connect people to other resources in the community, go to healthcare with them. So our job really is to work with whatever resources are available and really help victims and survivors of this kind of violence do what they want to do in their situation. So we are always recognizing that they are the expert in their own lives and want to be able to support and advocate for them in the ways that make the most sense for them.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to say I know a little bit about WISE, and I think it's a wonderful program, and I'm so glad that we have you to be able to advocate for abused women in abuse cases. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what you do and what your program.
So our program, each county in the state of Vermont, and actually it's a nation, there are in every state in the country, there are programs called Special Investigation Units, and that consists of, as Abby said, a multidisciplinary team. Our piece in it is we have a group of us who work for the SIU. The SIU is the Special Investigation Unit. We have a lot of acronyms, but we also have 2 child advocacy centers in Windsor County. Our program is the only child advocacy programs in the state that are actually co-housed in a parent-child center. So we are actually a program of the Family Place in Norwich. We have a child advocacy center there, which is it's a place that people can go, but we are an actual whole program. Our other child advocacy center is at the Parent-Child Center in Springfield, Vermont, the Springfield Area Parent-Child Center. So each of those are those are places that we can meet with our whole team. So what happens is when most of the cases that we have come through are children, but we also see adults, vulnerable adults. Any time that there's a case in the county that is that's a sexual abuse or a sexual assault, it comes to the SIU. And then we work with a multidisciplinary team, as I mentioned, including law enforcement, mental health, DCF if it's children, and then often our network providers who are WISE, or as Abby mentioned, the other groups that are further south in the county, to sort of provide a team to move the case, to work with this victim and survivor as they kind of move through the whole process. So basically what happens is, I'll just sort of speak to if it were a case with a child, because it's a little bit different how it happens. So typically what happens is somebody hears a disclosure from a child. It can be anybody. It can be a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, a friend, a teacher, a doctor, anybody at all, really, a social worker they're already working with, a therapist. That often happens. Here's a disclosure that a child makes about something of a sexual nature happening, basically a child sexual abuse, or something that's questionable that somebody might be wondering, this seems, that they make a call to the central intake number at DCF, and then an intake is generated, and that comes to us. And then I, in my role there, kind of connect all of the pieces with which law enforcement team we need to talk to, and we work with different law enforcement depending on where the events happened. We work with Vermont State Police. We have a great lieutenant there who has a bunch of different of his people who work with us, and then we have local police in all the different towns. So we coordinate with them. We coordinate with whoever the DCF worker for that district is. So we work with both the Hartford district and the Springfield district of social workers with DCF. And then we get that team together, and we bring the family to the Child Advocacy Center, and we conduct an interview with the child. We ourselves at the sort of the CAC staff, which is typically at an interview, it's myself, and then we have a dedicated forensic interviewer who's been highly trained to interview kids in a way that what they have to tell is in their own words. It's not can't be any leading questions. So that happens, and then we also work with the family while they're there. If it makes sense, we have our advocacy programs there to work with, because often these families have lots of different needs. Right. Yeah. And then they have a social worker. They'll have potentially an advocate from one of the network advocacy centers. They'll have myself, who kind of follows them through the process. They'll have a law enforcement person working with them, and then we also do referrals for mental health. At the family place, we have a in-house mental health person who we can have the kids see. In Springfield, we refer them to community mental health centers. So basically, it's kind of when a child makes a disclosure, it's a big upheaval in a family, and the first thing that happens actually is, before they even come to us, is a social worker through DCF makes sure that child is in a safe environment, make sure that they're, if it's something that's happened in their home, they create a safety plan. Even if it's not, they create a safety plan around how to make sure that child is being kept safe until they can get to the CAC, have their interview, and we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. So that's kind of the basic of what we do with the CAC and the SIU.
And as a community coming forward, how can we be helpful? What are some of the things that we need to know if we are going to go ahead and call about an abuse case, whether it be a marriage or a child or whatever it is that's going on? How can we be helpful in calling and reporting?
Well,
what's some of the things that we can ask, or we can tell you that we should know for information?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can speak again. It's a little bit different. Sometimes the way that referrals come in is different for kids than it is for adults. Adults often report themselves, either to the appropriate whoever it is. They tell a friend, or they show up at WISE themselves. Or with kids, it's different. Of course, they're not. It's typically they're telling somebody. I don't want to say accidentally, but it's not. They're not calling DCF and reporting that this has happened. So they'll tell somebody. The next thing that we actually, if it's a parent especially, that we usually do say is if the child is talking and sort of tells you everything that happened, let them talk. But we actually advise parents to not ask a whole lot of questions, to not to kind of make that call, or whoever it is that they're disclosing to go ahead and make that call to DCF, in part so that they can have a team to kind of wrap around, so that they're not kind of dealing with this all on their own, because it's, as you can imagine, incredibly emotional for parents often to hear something like this. So we ask that sort of whoever hears this from a child makes that call to DCF, and there's a phone number that goes to central intake in the state, and then they sort of figure out which district it needs to go to. because DCF is always involved when there's a case, when that, is a report. And then, so that's what I would say, is to not ask a whole lot of questions. Certainly, number one, to make sure that the child is safe right in that moment and in that next bit of time. But then to make the phone call to kind of get that ball rolling, and so that the whole team can kind of, start getting to work and figuring out what's going on. Our main goal is we want kids to get the help that they need, and to get, if there's abuse happening, to have it stop, of course.
So if a parent is concerned or somebody else is concerned and they call and they want to report what's going on, what's some of the details that they should know when they call you, like where it was, or
Yeah, that's
things like
certainly
that.
helpful. That's as much detail, as much of that detail as
not
possible.
so much as the story, but
Exactly.
information about parents.
Exactly.
Or, yeah.
Child's name, and the person who answers the telephone will ask those questions. They'll ask what, so as much of those sort of details as you can have are great to know. And certainly they will ask, when we get an intake, there are certainly some details of sort of what happened, and then we will sometimes we'll often try to talk to the reporter before we actually bring the child in to sort of get as much of the details as possible.
So there, in turn, the person reporting it will feel better that they at least have that basic information for you to go ahead and take over.
It's much more helpful for us to have more information than less information. We have to do a lot of sort of detective work then, trying to figure out. So it's helpful to have information. And I will say the team, the people that we work with are, our law enforcement, our network advocates, our DCF. People are really dedicated, and really, it's all in the best interest of again, with the folks that we're seeing, the cases that we see. We want, and so there's a lot of work goes into trying to do sort of best practice and making it as we already know that the kids and the adults who come and see us have experienced trauma. Our whole goal is to make it as least traumatic as possible. That just reminded me, actually, of a really important piece that I realized I forgot to mention. We also work closely with medical providers, and we work with the folks there's a program at Dartmouth called CAP. That's also a child advocacy protection program, and when we get kids in, we have them, we refer them for a medical exam at CAP, and we have nurses there who work with the kids and sort of do an exam, make sure that kids are, kind of safe and okay. And oftentimes for kids and for families, that's it's a reassurance that they're okay, that they're going to be okay, And there's often some of the kids that we see don't get regular medical care anyway, so it's helpful that they have. So I realize I left that out there. Another important piece of our team that works together.
It's good to know. I mean, that's good you remember that and put that in there, because that's important.
Yeah.
And Abby, I also want to ask you. Okay, so we talked about the process with reporting child abuse and some of the information that to do and not to do, such as not talk to the child as much as call that for information. So I want to talk a little about, because WISE is a little bit different. So can we talk a little bit about somebody that may need to call WISE, and what's some of the things that they should tell you?
So if someone is experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, or even isn't sure if they are, because a lot of people, women in particular, who are experiencing domestic violence in particular and sexual violence, don't actually see it as domestic violence or sexual assault. But often, friends or family members are saying, like, geez, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should give WISE a call. This doesn't look quite right to me. And it's not uncommon for someone to call us and say, I don't think this is really happening to me, but my family keeps telling me that I should call you. And especially when it comes to domestic violence, we will say something like, when we think about domestic violence, we think about it as a pattern of power and control. And that can be a real light bulb moment for a lot of victims, like, oh yeah, he's really controlling. And then we can have a conversation about what that actually looks like and what the impact is on them. In general, we want to be sure that people don't feel as though there's anything that they have to do when they call us. This is completely their own process. So when people call us, they can call us for whatever kind of help and support suits them best. So they can call and just be looking for information. They can call because they specifically want to have a forensic interview. They're wondering about what their healthcare options are. They're thinking about getting divorced. They want to get a protective order, or they're concerned about their children. It's not uncommon for women to call us when they start to see the impact of domestic violence on their children. So they feel like, oh, I can take this, but then when they see their little boy acting like they're the abusive partner, or a girl kind of being victimized, that's when things really start to feel different and is an impetus to give us a call. So we're always just wanting people to be able to have as much power and choice to do what's best for them and for their families. And our job is to offer as many options as possible so that they can make the choices that are going to be the best for them and their families. And this is true too for friends and family. They can call WISE or come in, and we can talk about how they can best support the people who they care about. And really the way to do that is by giving as much information as possible and supporting their loved ones to make the choices that work in their lives. It can be very dangerous for other people to tell victims of domestic violence to leave. I think when friends and family do that, they do it with the best intentions, but it's actually very dangerous. Victims of domestic violence are very strategic about when they leave, and that's for really good reason, because leaving domestic violence is the most dangerous time.
There's a lot that can happen from that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would like to ask too, if I could, as a community member, is that you guys are doing great work. As a community member, do you have volunteer opportunities for us?
I know that WISE does.
Yes,
right?
we sure do.
Okay.
So many people who volunteer at WISE volunteer as advocates on our crisis line. We do training at least twice a year, and there are somewhere around 25 or 30 volunteers on our crisis line right now. And we really would not be able to have a 24-hour crisis line without the amazing volunteer advocates that we have working with us. And those advocates are answering the crisis line, going to the hospital, going to police stations, doing the advocacy that we all do. The training is 30 hours, so it's a bit of a commitment, but when people get into it, they often, I think, feel just that much more excited about the work, and also realize there's no way that they would want to be doing that work unless they have at least that much training.
Right.
And then there's ongoing support and training. So every time that there's a volunteer advocate that's on the crisis line, there's also a staff person who's there to answer any questions and support the work that they're doing. So that's a major thing that people do, but we do all sorts of other programs. So we have our program Unedited Voices coming up again. It's sort of a performance piece. There are people in the community who write about their personal experiences with domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and either speak them themselves from the stage of the Lebanon Opera House or have someone else do that. So that's coming up in April, and that is a big event. And so we have people writing, we have people who are reading for other people, because some people who write their own accounts
Can
don't
we bring
want to be up on the
CATV?
page. Yes, yes,
We
of
would
course.
love that, yes.
And so there are other things to be doing along with that. We do a vigil in the fall. And so there are lots and lots of things to be done. The work at WISE is community work.
Good. So people in the community can get involved.
Absolutely.
And really,
You know, I think a lot of the time people think of organizations like WISE as organizations that, you know, whose main work is responding to individual calls. And that's a tremendous amount of work that we do. We work with about 1,100 people a year in the Upper Valley and are probably not even scratching the surface. It's a huge issue and a huge problem. But we also really see it as our jobs to work at ending the violence. And you don't do that with, you know, a dozen people working in an office. You do that bringing a whole community together to see what an enormous problem it is, what an incredible impact it has on the community, and how important it is for us to work together.
It's all about awareness. Like,
Totally.
I think this is the first time the child advocacy's come here.
Yeah.
And so it's a great opportunity for the community to be more aware of what you actually do.
Yeah.
And, you know, all that you do, not just what you do, but all that you do.
And I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I think it is really true. I would guess that I'm hoping that that's part of why we really wanted to do this program, because I would guess that a large majority of people don't even know that a special investigation unit exists in their county or the child advocacy programs. Unfortunately, many people find out when they have to utilize it, which is too bad.
This is great where you can bring it up and people can talk and they can ask questions.
So that it's really important for us to let the community know that there actually is a very dedicated group of people who are working hard all the time to both advocate for and to end child sexual assault, child sexual abuse in our community, and all sorts of other. We also, through the SIU, we deal with all cases, again, of child and adult sexual abuse, but also child serious physical abuse. So we get those cases in as well. So, and it's we're busy.
Oh, I can imagine.
And as far as volunteer opportunities with us itself, with the SIU, with the Special Investigation Unit, not so much really, only because it's our team is pretty. We don't have a lot of time that where kids are. When the kids come to us, they're with this team who are. They're all sort of professional in their capacity that they're working with the family. However, certainly at our sort of umbrella organization, the Family Place, there are plenty of volunteer opportunities.
And it would be wonderful if we actually could interview the Family Place.
And I was going to say, if anybody wants to volunteer and come and paint our Child Advocacy Center in Springfield, it really needs it.
Painter. Your job.
Right.
So our whole goal is to have our two centers are, child-friendly, safe places where kids can come. As I mentioned earlier, they've already been traumatized. We want it to be as, and sort of the old model before the SIU model was in place was kind of a kid would make a disclosure to, say, a friend, and then that friend might tell a teacher, and then the teacher would talk to the child and ask them what happened, and then they might say, well, we should go talk to the principal, and they go tell the principal, and then they would have to go tell the nurse, and then they would tell a doctor, and then they would tell a police officer, and then they would tell their parent, and then a social worker. And our hope is that we bring the child to a child-friendly, safe place, and the team is there. One person is in the room with them, with the child. Our interviewer, she sits in a place that's cozy, sort of like this, and talks to the child. Spends a lot of time getting to know them, helping them get comfortable, and then they talk about sort of what happened. And the rest of the team is actually in an observation room, watching the interview, so that they can help our interviewer, if she misses any questions, or sort of get the information that's most helpful to them. And then while that's going on, while the child is being interviewed, I'm meeting with the family and sort of helping them figure out what other sorts of resources they need. Do they need a restraining order? Do we need, are they having sort of issues of domestic violence in their home? Do we want to get them connected with a network advocate? Does the family themselves, do the parents, other children need mental health services? Do they need other services? How's their housing, their medical, or do they have food in their house? All of those things are things that I talk to the families with while their child is being interviewed. And then the team meets with the the parents again to sort of say, this is what we found out and this is what's going to happen next. We also connect them, if it sort of goes in this direction, we also connect them with a victim's advocate at the state's attorney's office who also helps follow their case through if it were to go to court, or they sort of help with that whole process as well.
It's really good that we got that, and we got the people that know how to do that, And I think, for me, it's good to know that I can participate if it is in this level right here of interviewing. And like you said, Family Place needed a painter. There's somebody out there that loves to paint, There's somebody out there that loves to do a certain type of thing that you may need done. And if they can hear that, volunteerism is so important for people. And I just think this would be a great opportunity for them to do, like you said, Family Place or WISE, or however they can be helpful or want to be helpful.
And I'll just put in one more plug. You're a nonprofit, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, WISE is a nonprofit. There you go.
As is the Family Place,
So we can
the Child Advocacy Centers.
Yeah, so there's a lot of support needed.
Yes, there
funding,
is. Exactly.
I'm sure food, clothing, whatever else that the community can help with.
And I think the most important thing is just having the awareness that we're out there, and that if you are, if you see an adult or a family that's in sort of a questionable, something that you're just wondering about, if you see a child or if a child makes a disclosure to you that something has happened to them, there are places that you can call and get them some help. You could remain anonymous.
Right. Yeah.
That when you make a phone call to the DCF Central Intake Office, I should say that too. You don't have to say who you are. It's helpful to us if we can talk to the reporter to find out sort of how they heard about this, but you don't have to. So that's, yeah.
And I think I'm looking through the questions that we had here, and I think the last one is about just a little bit about what we were talking about, education and outreach, supporting Act 1, mandating reporting requirements in school, raising awareness of education among kids and adults from the consequences of sexting, engaging in healthy relationships, power and control wheel. And it says both Abby and Nancy, so... So I imagine you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's so. Part of what we do and hope to do more of is to get out into the community, into schools and different programs to, number one, do trainings on mandated reporter trainings. People who work with kids are mandated reporters, and to have training around what does that mean? What does that even mean? And who do I call, and why do I call, and when do I call? And it's our goal to get out there so everybody who in the community who works really with people at all, children, or adults, should know what mandated reporting means. And the second part of your question about we've seen because of electronics, we have seen a huge uptick in cases that are sexting, and I don't know if you know what that means, but
yes,
So we're
familiar with it.
I won't ask why, but
I don't even have a cell phone, so it's not possible.
Unfortunately, it's a quick and easy thing to do. Yeah, kids, young teenagers snap a photo of themselves, they send it out there. They don't realize that once it's out there, it's out there, and perpetrators can get a hold of it. And so part of what we're trying to do, number one, is to figure out how to handle all of the cases that are coming in with that, but also to educate teenagers and kids that this is number one, it's illegal, and number two, it's really dangerous. It's really, you're putting an image of yourself out there. Even Snapchat, believe me, we work with police officers. That stuff does not go away. If people want to find it, they can find it. So that's part of what we do is community education and letting people know that these issues are real, and they're big in our communities, surprisingly so.
And I like what we're talking about as far as educating and outreaching and letting people know and become aware, because there's so many people that do have questions, and they do want to know how they can either be helpful, or how, if they're suspicious of something, they can report it, or if they have somebody they're concerned about, that they can call and find out if they can do anything. And I see that a lot in the community, people that wanting to be helpful to people. So I'm really, really glad that we've done this show, and that we're going to do many more. And I want to make sure that I thank both of you, but I also want to make sure that we can get some numbers and a website out there maybe for people to see. So you want to
Sure. Actually, I had to write it on a sticky note because I didn't
She did, she wrote it
memorize
down,
it.
sticky note.
So this is the phone number for central intake, DCF central intake. If you suspect that a child, if you suspect that there is either sexual abuse or physical abuse going on, or emotional, any kind of abuse with children, you can call, and it will get, it will go to the central intake, and it will get sort of funneled to the right place. You know, it'll either come to the SIU or it'll go to an ongoing social worker in DCF. So that phone number is 1-800-649-5285, and that's, people can call. You know, it's a 24-hour phone line. They can call if they suspect that anything's going on with a child. And the CAC, the Child Advocacy Center, as I said, it's part of the Family Place, so that you can find that on the Family Place website, which
right.
I suppose it's just www the Family Place.
The Family Place.
Yes,
You would think.
sorry. And
If she's
and there's
wrong.
a link on there to the Child Advocacy Program and the SIU. Yeah.
And Abby, would you
Yeah.
like to tell us some more information about how people, I mean, is there several numbers, one number? Or,
So there's one number that people can call and get to whomever you might want to be connected to at WISE, and that's our 24-hour crisis line, which is 1-866-348-9473. I also, can I refer back to some of the education work?
Yes, yes.
Because I think WISE is in all of the grades in the Upper Valley schools, and to talk about the response, but also, again, you know, WISE really and the other network programs sees part of its mission as ending the violence. So really looking at what needs to shift in our culture so that the violence ends. And
Big job.
yeah, but it takes all of us,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
it's
it
so
takes the
important
community.
that the
Right.
community
Yeah.
comes together around it. And in line with that, I wanted to also mention how the SIU and multidisciplinary teams have been such a game changer for adult victims of sexual assault. That, you know, until victims of sexual assault feel as though they can make reports and that they're going to be treated with respect and going to be believed, and that there is going to be an advocate at the table to make sure that their rights are being protected, we aren't going to really get anywhere with the criminal legal response to sexual violence. But these multidisciplinary teams have really been a game changer. We see so many more people who are really willing to come forward and talk about their experiences because they know they're going to be treated with respect and are going to have choices about what's going to make the most sense for them in terms of moving forward in the system.
Can I just mention one more thing?
Sure.
That just I would say the same.
Well,
that
this
we
is
just,
talking, right?
Yeah, that's okay, good.
We're-
That we just how much the SIU appreciates that we have this team as well, and that Abby comes to all of our case reviews, for example. And even if we don't have that many adults on our case review that month, she comes anyway, and it's always really helpful to know that we're she will have information that we might not have had, or sort of knows maybe more other parts of that family's life maybe that we didn't know about. And actually that just also reminds me real quick of sometimes part of the asking about volunteers earlier is that I just want to really stress that all of the work we do is really confidential. Everybody who sits in our room when we're doing, say, a case review has a understanding that of confidentiality, that to be in that room, and that nothing ever goes beyond that. So I just want to make that really clear.
Yeah, but it's so important. It really is.
And it's a lot of moving pieces sometimes. We have a lot of team members, but everybody has that clear understanding that this is confidential work. What else was I going to... Something
while
about
you're
the,
thinking, can I
Sure.
kind of piggyback on the confidentiality piece?
Yes.
Sure.
Because there, a lot of the time, adult victims really don't want information shared, and one of the roles of advocacy is really being a sounding board for people so that people can talk about anything in their lives and know that we are absolutely not going to share that with anyone. So we can be sitting at case review and maybe sort of hypothetically talking about what a victim, a victim's perspective may be in a situation like that. But if we're actually working with that victim, we are not going to share any information at all that they've shared with us unless they specifically ask us to.
Not even with us.
Yeah,
Right?
that's so important. I mean,
Yeah.
it just is.
Yeah. No, it is. It's really important.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding in the team, again, that makes sense for everyone
Yes.
on the team. It's not as though
Right.
the network program is withholding information and being difficult. It's that everyone at that table understands that the more support that victims and survivors have, the better it is for everyone, because they're going to be more likely to come forward, more likely to trust the process, feel more supported, so be able to stay with the process, even though the process can be really difficult. That if they feel as though they're in more danger because they've chosen to engage with the criminal legal system, that we're going to all be there trying to figure out, what is going to be safest for them, and really respecting the choices that they make around that.
And that just reminded me of the other thing that I was thinking of, which is, and I think that probably as you do a later show, I believe that Julie, who you talked to, who's the SIU director, will talk about this more. But there's sort of a new program that we're rolling out that actually is called Start by Believing, and it's sort of a concept that we're working with our whole team, that which is a little bit unfortunate that we even have to say that, but sadly it's true. The way that I think that historically we can talk about the way that victims of sexual violence or sexual abuse, both adults and children, that wasn't always the case, and so it's a mindset to sort of that we're all hoping to absorb and to sort of put out there for others to hear about and learn about, is that when somebody comes to us with a phone call, it's understanding that the way trauma works, and that people, victims of both sexual violence and of sexual abuse, may change their story from the first time they talk to someone to the second time they talk to someone. That doesn't mean that they're lying.
Right.
It means that their brain is allowing them to, and the way that they're dealing with trauma is allowing them to remember things at different times, is allowing them to, sort of make the event whole somehow and tell more pieces of it. So that's part of the concept of, we don't make a judgment when somebody walks in the door. We hear what they have to say. We hear what they have to say as many times as they need to say it. And our whole, all of our team, including law enforcement, which frankly is a shift for some of them in the way that they might have worked in the past. And I think that's another way that doing this team approach has been really helpful, to have us sort of all at the table, and sometimes even the language that we use coming from different disciplines. A state police officer might use really different language than a mental health practitioner might use around sort of around this whole topic, and sort of hearing each other's language at the table, and kind of coming from a place of respect for all of the disciplines and realizing how they're all needed has been really helpful for all of us, and hopefully for the families and people that we deal with.
But this is great. This is a great opportunity, and I really want to thank both of you, the SI unit, and everybody involved. I want to thank you for bringing this and being willing to open up to help us be more aware.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us very
And
much.
did you want to, you gave a phone number, you can give a website, I think.
Oh, right. The WISE website, and I mean, if you just Google it, you'll get there, but it's WISEUV, www.wiseuv.org.
Is there anything else you want to let the community know at this time, or we're looking forward to another one, next show?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure what that.
Well, I want to thank both
Thank
of
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Looking forward to doing more work with you.
Excellent.
So
Thanks, Abby.
this is Linda Carbonell, and we are saying goodbye today for the lens into the process of child advocacy in the SI unit, Special Investigative Unit. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.